Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The lock clicked shut with a finality that sounded less like security and more like a sentence. I froze, my hand still hovering over the brass knob. The cool air of the hallway severed from the suffocating warmth of the apartment behind me. It wasn't just the sound of a door closing. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. I didn't need to turn around to know he was there. The air in the room had changed, growing heavier, charged with the scent of sandalwood and something sharper. Ozone, perhaps, or just the electric crackle of my own terrified nervous system. A low, baritone chuckle vibrated through the floorboards. A sound so rich and mocking it made the fine hairs on the back of my neck stand at attention. Going somewhere, Julian? The voice was unrecognizable. Yet the cadence buried itself in my memory like a splinter I'd failed to dig out 3 years ago. I turned slowly, my breath hitching in a throat suddenly devoid of moisture. 3 years ago, Lysander Thorne had been a phantom in a baggy gray hoodie. A quiet, hunched figure in the back of the lecture hall whose only defining feature was the speed at which he scribbled complex equations. He was the invisible genius, the stepping stone. I had been the desperate, failing scholarship student with a pretty face and a moral compass that pointed wherever survival dictated. I needed to pass Physics 301 to keep my funding. He just needed to be seen. It was the oldest trade in the book, though we never signed a contract. I gave him attention, bright smiles in the cafeteria, lingering touches on his forearm when he explained thermodynamics, the illusion of intimacy. He gave me answers. He gave me his nights, his notes, his sanity. And when the final grades were posted, and I saw that beautiful A next to my name, I was done. I remember the night he confessed. It was raining, cliché as it was. He stood outside my dorm, soaking wet, clutching a crumpled letter. He told me he loved me. He thought we were something. I didn't even let him finish. I laughed. A nervous, cruel sound, and told him I had a date. I closed the door in his face. I ghosted his texts. I blocked his number. I erased him because looking at him made me feel like the user I was. That was then. Now, standing in the center of the luxurious, modern living room of the only apartment in the city I could afford, stood a man who looked nothing like the phantom I had erased. Lysander Thorne had grown into his intelligence. The baggy hoodie was gone, replaced by a bespoke charcoal dress shirt that clung to broad shoulders and tapered down to a lean, powerful waist. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and veined with intent. His hair, once a messy mop, was now styled back, sharp and severe, framing a face that had lost its softness. His jaw was a weapon. His eyes, behind rimless glasses that caught the light, were cold, dark pools of calculation. Lysander, I breathed, the name tasting like ash. He leaned against the kitchen island, crossing his arms. The movement was fluid, predatory. You look surprised, Julian. Didn't you read the name on the lease agreement? It said L.T. Holdings. I stammered, gripping the strap of my bag. I didn't know. You didn't look, he corrected, his voice smooth as velvet dragging over gravel. You never look closely at the things you think are beneath you. You just take what you need and move on. I'm leaving, I said, my voice rising an octave. I can't stay here. You can't leave, he countered calmly. You signed a 12-month contract. The penalty for breaking it early is substantial. 3 months' rent. Do you have $12,000 lying around, Julian? He knew I didn't. He knew exactly why I was here. My family's business had collapsed. My scholarship was gone after graduation. I was drowning in debt, working 2 barista jobs, desperately trying to keep up appearances in a city that ate the poor alive. This apartment, an impossible steal in the city center, was my lifeline. Why? I whispered. Why would you want to live with me? After what I did? Lysander pushed off the counter and took a step toward me. The space between us shrank, consumed by his presence. He stopped inches from me, looming tall enough that I had to crane my neck. He smelled expensive. He smelled like power. Because, he murmured, leaning down until his lips brushed the shell of my ear, sending a shiver violently down my spine. I've spent 3 years calculating the trajectory of this moment. In physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You exerted a force on me, Julian. A devastating one. He pulled back, his dark eyes boring into mine with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. Now, he whispered, a cruel smile touching his lips. It's time for the reaction. The first week was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I expected yelling. I expected him to demand an apology, to scream about the night in the rain. I was prepared for anger. I could handle anger. I could charm my way out of anger. But Lysander gave me silence. He existed in the apartment like a dangerous statue. He would be in the kitchen when I woke up, drinking black coffee and reading on a tablet. He wouldn't look up. If I said, "Good morning," he would turn the page. If I entered a room, he didn't leave, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was dismantling me by refusing to acknowledge my existence, just as I had done to him. It was maddening. I found myself performing for him, just like I used to, but with a frantic desperation. I cleaned the apartment until my hands were raw. I cooked elaborate dinners that he wouldn't touch. I walked around in my boxers, a pathetic attempt to use the only currency I had ever possessed, my body, to get a reaction. He looked right through me. "Stop it," he said on the 5th night. I froze. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a plate of pasta I had just made. He was at the table, his laptop open. He hadn't looked up, but his fingers had stopped moving on the keyboard. "Stop what?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Stop trying to seduce me," he said, his voice flat. "It's pathetic. You look like a desperate street performer dancing for coins." The insult slapped me harder than a hand. "I'm just trying to be a good roommate." He finally looked up. His gaze was clinical, dissecting. "You're trying to gain leverage. You think if you make me want you again, you'll have the upper hand. You think you can bat your eyelashes and I'll forget that you treated me like a disposable calculator." "I was young," I argued, my defense weak even to my own ears. "I was stupid, Lysander. I needed to pass. I was terrified of losing my scholarship." "And the confession?" he asked softly. "Did you need to laugh?" I went silent. The shame that I had buried under layers of narcissism and survival instinct clawed at my throat. "I didn't think you'd care this much," I muttered, looking at the floor. "That," he said, closing his laptop with a snap, "is the most insulting part. You didn't think I was human enough to be scarred." He stood up and walked past me to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. As he passed, his arm brushed mine. The contact was electric. I flinched, dropping the plate. Ceramic shattered. Pasta splattered across the pristine white tiles. I scrambled down, frantic. "I'll clean it up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I was on my hands and knees, picking up shards of pottery, my hands shaking. I reached for a sharp piece, and a hand clamped around my wrist. His grip was iron. "Stop," he ordered. I looked up. Lysander was crouching in front of me. We were on the floor, surrounded by the mess I had made. A perfect metaphor for my life. "You're going to cut yourself," he said. His voice wasn't warm, but the ice had cracked. "I don't care," I whispered, tears suddenly stinging my eyes. The stress of the debt, the job, the guilt, and living in this cage with the man I had wronged. It was all too much. "I ruin everything. I ruin it." Lysander stared at me. His thumb rubbed a slow circle against the pulse point of my wrist. He was measuring my heart rate. "You are a chaotic variable, Julian," he murmured. "Entropy in human form. Why did you bring me here?" I choked out. "If you hate me, why live with me? Why torture yourself?" "Because," he said, his eyes dropping to my lips, then back to my eyes. "I needed to see if the reality lived up to the memory. I needed to know if I was obsessed with a person or a projection." "And?" I asked, my breath trembling. "And," He released my wrist, standing up abruptly. You're smaller than I remember, and far more breakable. He stepped over the mess and walked away. Leave it. The cleaning service comes tomorrow. The shift happened 2 weeks later. I came home from a double shift at the cafe, smelling like burnt milk and exhaustion. My feet were throbbing. I unlocked the door and stumbled inside, only to find the living room dark, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lysander was standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. I tried to sneak past him to my room, but his voice stopped me. Come here. It wasn't a request. I hesitated, then dropped my bag and walked over. The view from the penthouse was breathtaking, a sea of lights stretching out into the darkness. Drink, he said, holding out the glass. I took it. Whiskey. Expensive. I took a sip, the burn welcoming in my chest. I saw your boss today, Lysander said, staring out at the city. My heart stopped. You went to the cafe? I bought the building the cafe is in, he corrected casually. I was doing a site inspection. Of course. He was rich. Absurdly, obscenely rich. It turned out that the equations he was scribbling back in college weren't just homework. They were the foundation for a predictive algorithm he'd sold to a tech giant for millions. He yells at you, Lysander noted. That manager, Dave. He's stressed, I said defensively. He's incompetent, Lysander countered. And he touches your shoulder too much when he passes by. I looked at him sharply. Why were you watching me? Lysander turned to face me. The shadows cast sharp angles across his face. Because you are mine. The words hung in the air, heavy and possessive. I'm not yours, I whispered, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I'm just your tenant. No. Lysander stepped closer, backing me until my calves hit the low windowsill. There was nowhere to run. The glass was behind me, the drop to the street dizzying, and Lysander was in front of me, a dark wall of intensity. You lost the right to be your own person when you decided to use people like tools. You made yourself a commodity, Julian. And I'm the highest bidder. You're crazy, I breathed. I am a man of logic, he corrected. But you defy logic. I should hate you. By every metric, I should despise you. I have the money, the status, the power. You are nothing but a failed pretty boy with debt. He reached out, his hand wrapping around my throat. He didn't squeeze, but the weight of his palm was heavy, claiming. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. So why? He gritted out, his composure fracturing. Does the thought of that manager touching you make me want to burn the building down? This was the break. This was the moment the calm genius snapped. Lysander, I gasped, my hands coming up to grip his wrist. I should have pushed him away. I should have been terrified. But God help me, I wasn't. I was starving for this. I was starving to be looked at with this kind of intensity again. For 3 years, I had been invisible, just another struggling nobody. But in his eyes, even in his hate, I was the center of the universe. You wanted to use me? Lysander hissed, leaning in until our foreheads touched. Fine. You want to be taken care of? You want to sail through life on your looks? I'll give you that. I'll pay your debts. I'll buy your cafe. I'll give you the world. His grip on my throat tightened fractionally, tilting my head back. But you will never ghost me again. You will never walk away from me. You answer my texts. You look at me. You belong to me. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice wrecked. It's a contract, he murmured. Do we have a deal? It was madness. It was toxic. It was selling my soul to the devil I had created. I looked into his eyes that had once looked at me with puppy dog adoration, now burning with a dark, consuming hunger. I realized then that I didn't want the nice boy with the physics notes. I wanted this. I wanted the monster who saw exactly how flawed I was and wanted to keep me anyway. Yes, I whispered. Lysander didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply crashed his lips onto mine. It wasn't a soft kiss. It was a collision. It was 3 years of repressed anger and desire exploding at once. He kissed me like he was punishing me, his teeth grazing my lip, his tongue demanding entry. I melted against him, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like whiskey and vengeance. He lifted me, his strength effortless, and sat me on the wide windowsill, stepping between my legs to press himself flush against me. I wrapped my legs around his waist, needing the friction, needing the anchor. "Say it," he growled against my mouth. "I'm yours," I moaned. Again. "I'm yours, Lysander. Only yours." He pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes blown wide and black. He looked at me, flushed, swollen-lipped, trembling, and for the first time, the coldness in his expression shattered completely, replaced by a triumphant, terrifying possessiveness. "Good," he whispered. "Now, let's go over the variables of your new reality." The months that followed were a blur of intensity. Lysander was true to his word. My debts vanished. The manager, Dave, was fired for embezzlement. I didn't have to work, but the cage was gilded. Lysander was demanding. He checked my phone. He dictated who I could see. If I was 5 minutes late coming home, he would be waiting by the door, the air around him vibrating with suppressed rage until I walked in. It should have been stifling. It should have been a horror story. But one rainy Tuesday, the true nature of our dynamic revealed itself. I was sick, a bad flu that had me shivering and feverish. I was curled up on the sofa, miserable. Lysander came home early. He took one look at me and the terrifying CEO facade dropped. He stripped off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and went into the kitchen. He made soup. He brought me medicine. He sat on the floor beside the couch, running a cool cloth over my forehead with a tenderness that contradicted everything he claimed to be. "You're an idiot," he muttered softly, brushing hair out of my damp eyes. "You went out without a coat." "I forgot it," I rasped. "I'll buy you 10 coats," he said. "Put one in every room so you don't have to remember." I looked at him, really looked at him. Underneath the expensive suit and the possessive streak, the boy from the lecture hall was still there. He was just protected now. He had built a fortress around his heart, and he had dragged me inside it and locked the gate. "Lysander," I whispered. "Hush. Sleep." "I'm sorry," I said. It was the first time I had said it without him forcing it out of me. For everything. For back then. His hand paused on my forehead. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked again the question that always haunted us. "Why me? You're a genius. You could calculate a better partner." Lysander sighed, a long, weary sound. He rested his forehead against my arm. "It's the one variable I can't solve, Julian," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "Logic dictates I should discard you. But my heart, it's defective. It only beats for the thing that broke it." He looked up, and the vulnerability in his eyes broke me. "You didn't just use me to pass physics, Julian. You became my physics. You became the gravity I can't escape." I reached out, cupping his sharp jaw. "I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." He turned his face into my palm, kissing the center of my hand. "I know, because I have the key." "No," I corrected gently, threading my fingers through his hair. "Because I don't want to leave." He froze. He looked at me, searching for the lie, searching for the manipulation. But there was none. I had fallen in love with my captor, with my victim, with my savior. "Then prove it," he whispered. "How?" "Stay," he said. "Just stay." "I'm here," I promised. "I'm right here." And as the rain battered the windows of our high-rise fortress, the viper didn't just tame the wolf. He realized the wolf had been lonely all along. We were two broken variables who had crashed into each other, and somehow, in the wreckage, we had found an equation that worked. And that is how the physicist calculated the exact trajectory to break a heart and rebuild it. If you enjoyed seeing Lysander take absolute control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, Would you forgive a lover who locked you in a golden cage if they gave you the world? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,